At the very beginning of the Torah narrative that makes up the reading for these days of awe, the Holy One notices Sarah. Va'adonai pakad et Sarah ka'asher amar. The Holy One paid attention and noticed Sarah. As we begin the journey through the Torah for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I want to invite any of us who feel like part of what we need to do in these coming weeks and months as we move into 5781, part of what we need to do is notice and pay closer attention to ourselves, our hearts, our families, our children, our colleagues. If you feel that part of your work, first work, is to pay closer attention and notice, I invite you to stand for this first aliyah as Laura Liebeck lanes the Torah.
Amen. Vadonoi pakad et Sarah ka'asher amar. Vayas Adonai leSarah ka'asher diber. Vatahar vateled Sarah la'Avraham ben lizkunav lamoed asher diber oto Elohim. Vayikra Avraham et Shem beno hanolad lo asher yalda lo Sarah Yitzhak. Vayomal Avraham ben Yitzhak beno ben Shemona Yamim ka'asher tziva oto Elohim.
In this second aliyah, Abraham conceives a son at 100 years old, at an age when it would have been far beyond any reasonable hope that he would conceive a son. So for this second aliyah, which Judy Kropf will lay in for us, I invite all of us who feel like we have dreams, we have hopes that haven't yet been fulfilled, and it might feel like it's too late to do them. I invite all of us with these dreams delayed, these dreams deferred, to stand up for the second aliyah and feel that hopefulness of Abraham, who had his dream fulfilled at 100, and so too might we have our dreams filled.
ואברהם בן 100 שנה, בהיוולד לו את יצחק בנו, ותאמר שרה צחוק, עשה לי אלוהים, כל השומע יצחק לי. ותאמר מי מליל אברהם, העניק אבנים שרה, כי ילדתי בן לזקוניו. ויגדל הילד ויגמל, ויעש אברהם משתה גדול, ביום יגמל את יצחק.
In this third aliyah, which Judy Kropf will lay for us, Sarah commands Abraham to cast out Garesh et Hagar, to send out this maidservant who had become a problem. But of course, it doesn't work out so easily. Those things that are difficult for us, those things that are hard, we can't just cast them out and send them away and pretend they never existed. So this third aliyah is for all of us who have things in our life that we wish we could just throw away, but we recognize that we can't. And perhaps our challenge is to go further than Abraham did and face those things we wish we could cast out with compassion, with love, with curiosity. So for everyone who is looking to bring some compassionate curiosity to difficult things in their life, as perhaps Abraham should have done with Hagar, I invite you to rise for this third aliyah.
ותרא שרה את בן הגר המצרית, אשר ילדה לאברהם מצחק, ותאמר לאברהם גרש האמה הזאת בית בנה, כי לא יירש בין האמה הזאת עם בני עם יצחק, וירא הדבר מאוד בעיני אברהם על אודות בנו. ויאמר אלוהים את אברהם, אל ירא בעיניך על הנהר ועל אמתך, כל אשר תאמר אליך שרה, שמע בקולה, כי ביצחק יקרא לך זרע.
In this fourth aliyah, which Beth Pearson will chant for us, Hagar contemplates the death of her son Ishmael, who fortunately does not die. But when she contemplates it, she simply bursts into tears. In this season of tshuva, in this season when so much of our work is on trying to become better people, sometimes we also just need to acknowledge the pain of what it is we're trying to change, the difficulty of the ways in which we're trying to grow. Sometimes the only thing that makes sense to do is simply cry and feel our pain before we move on and try to rectify it, try to improve our situations. So for this fourth aliyah, I invite all of us who simply need to cry, who simply need to spend time acknowledging the pain of some of the situations of our life, to stand and rise as we hear this fourth aliyah.
Amen. וגם את בן האמה לגוי אשימנו, כי זרעך הוא. וישכם אברהם בבוקר, ויקח לחם וחמת מים, ויתן אל הגר, שמו שכמה ואת הילד וישלחיה, ותלך ותצא במדבר באר שבע, ויכלו המים מן החמת, ותשלך את הילד תחת אחד השיחים, ותלך ותשב לה מנגד הרחק, כמטחווי קשת, כי אמרה אל אראה במות הילד, ותשב מנגד, ותישא את קולה ותהב. וישמע אלוהים אל כל הנהר, ויקרא מלאך אלוהים אל הגר מן השמיים, ויאמר לה מלאך הגר, אל תיראי, כי שמע אלוהים אל כל הנהר באשר הוא שם.
In this fifth aliyah, the scene opens with Hagar sitting, contemplating, fearing for the death of her son Ishmael. But then something remarkable happens. V'yifkach Elohim et einea v'ter'eh be'er mayim. God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water that had been there all along. She had been afraid that her son Ishmael would die of thirst, but when God opened her eyes, she noticed the well that had been there all along, echoing God noticing Sarah at the very beginning of our Parsha. So for this aliyah, which Beth Pearson is going to chant for us, I invite everyone who suspects, intuits, feels that the answers to their prayers, the things they need, are already at hand, are already in our lives. And the question is just, how do we open our eyes that we might notice them, that we might see what is already there? So I invite everyone who is hoping for their eyes to be opened to stand for this next aliyah read by Beth Pearson.
Amen. קומי שאי את הנער, והחזיקי את ידך בו, כי לגוי גדול אשימנו. ויפקח אלוהים את עיניה, ותרא באר מים, ותלך ותמלא את החמת מים, ותשק את הנער. ויהי אלוהים את הנער ויגדל, וישב במדבר, ויהי רובה קשת, וישב במדבר פרן, ותיקח לו אמו אישה מארץ מצרים.
In this sixth Aliyah, the action moves away from the family drama of Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar to the political drama between Abraham and Abimelech, the king in the land that Abraham is trying to move through. And they had had some dealings, and finally Abimelech says to Abraham, God is with you in everything that you do. Therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my kith and kin, but will deal with me and with the land you have sojourned as loyally as I have dealt with you. And Abraham said, I swear it. So often in the dynamics of our families, there's pain that emerges from secrets untold. Deception, misdirection, deceit, truths that haven't been fully articulated. So as we move into this next Aliyah, which Dan Fishman will chant for us, I invite you to contemplate if there are stories that are not entirely true, if there's misdirection or obfuscation in the stories of your family, and if those stories in fact serve you and the people you love, or if they damage you and the people you love, and to discern what might be a wise path forward around these stories as we move into 5781.
Amen. Vayehi beit hahi, vayomer Avimelech, ufichol sar tzva'o el Avraham lemor, Elohim imcha bechol asher ata oseh, ve'ata Ishav ali ve'Elohim hena im tishkur li ulnini ulnechti kach chesed asher asiti imcha ta'aseh imadi ve'im haaretz asher garta ba. Vayomer Avraham anochi ishavea. Vehochiach Avraham et Avimelech al odot be'er hamayim asher gazlu avdei Avimelech. Vayomer Avimelech lo yadati mi asa et hadavar hazeh vegam ata lo higadta li. וגם אנוכי לא שמעתי בלתי היום. ויקח אברהם צאן ובקר, ויתן לאבימלך, ויכרתו שניהם ברית.
In this seventh Aliyah, which Linda Tafapolsky will chant for us, Avraham and Abimelech conclude their conflict by swearing an oath to each other about how they'll behave going forward. As we are in this season of tshuva, of trying to do the work of becoming better people, I wonder if there are oaths, serious oaths that we want to take to say, in this year, I am committing to such and such. I'm committing to do this. So if you feel like you are ready to make a promise, to make a neder, to make an oath for how you're going to behave and how you're going to conduct yourself in a certain way in this coming year, I invite you to stand for this seventh Aliyah.
Amen. Vayatzev Avraham et Sheva kivsot hatzon levadhen. Vayomer Avimelech el Avraham ma hena sheva kfasot ha'ele asher hitzavta levadana. Vayomer ki et sheva kfasot tikach miadi be'avur תהיה לי לעדה, כי חפרתי את הבאר הזאת. על כן קרא למקום ההוא באר שבע, כי שם נשבעו שניהם. ויכרתו ברית בבאר שבע, ויקם Avimelech ufichul tzar tzvao vayashuvu el eretz plishtim. Vayita eshel bever shava vayikra sham v'shem Adonai el olam. Vayagor Avraham be'eretz plishtim yamim rabim.
At this point in the Torah service, we offer a prayer on behalf of all of those who are sick and in need of healing. I invite you to say out loud the names of those who you're carrying in your heart who are in need of some healing. Misha Berach Avotenu Avraham Yitzhak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Hu Yivarech v'Rapeh et kol hacholim b'kila kadosh hazeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimlei Rachamim Alehem v'Hachazikam Rabotam v'Yishlach Lehem Mehera Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'toch Shar Cholei Yisrael Yom Tov Hi Milizok Refuah Karova Lavo Hashta Bagalav Izman Kariv V'Nomar Amen. May the Holy One who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bring blessing and healing to all those who suffer illness within our congregational family. May the Holy One mercifully restore them to health and vigor, granting them physical and spiritual well-being, together with all others who are ill. And although holidays such as this are a time to refrain from petitions, we yet hope and pray that healing is at hand. And let us say, Amen. In this Maftir Aliyah, which Cantor Ellen Gersh will chant for us, we hear of how the calendar is structured so that Rosh Hashanah is always in this time of the year, always in the fall, always in the season of the harvest. So I invite you to look back for a moment on 5780, on the year that has passed, a year that has been challenging, certainly for us nationally and communally, and perhaps for you personally as well. And I invite you to look through that difficulty and look, what is there to harvest from that year? What is there to glean from this year that has passed? So if you feel clear on what harvest you have to bring from this year past, I invite you to rise and stand for the Maftir Aliyah.
ובחודש השביעי, באחד לחודש, מקרא קודש יהיה לכם, כל מלאכת עבודה לא תעשו, יום תרועה יהיה לכם, ועשיתם עולה לריח ניחוח לאדוני, par ben bakar echad dayil echad כבשים בני שנה, שבעה תמימים. ומנחתם סולת בלולב השמן, 3 עשרונים לפר, 2 עשרונים לעיל. ועשרון אחד לכבש האחד, לשבעת הכבשים, ושעיר עזים אחד לחטאת, לכפר עליכם, מלבד עולת החודש ומנחתה, ועולת התמיד ומנחתה, ונזקיהם כמשפטם, לריח ניחוח אישה לאדוני.
In the Haftorah reading that rounds out the Torah service on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we hear the story of Hannah, who's longing for a child. Her desire and need for a child is so intense that she can taste the pain of that dream unfulfilled. She steps into the temple and offers a prayer, truly and honestly from her broken heart, which begins her on the path of her own redemption. All of us have something deep in our heart that we're missing, that we're longing for, that we want, and that we're often too afraid to even name because it's so painful. As we prepare for Cantor Ellen Gersh to chant this Haftorah from the book of Samuel, I invite all of us who can feel that longing, feel that need for something in our life that is lacking, to stand so that we might articulate it in words, in the privacy of our home, in the privacy of our hearts, in the privacy of our prayer, to name what it is we're longing for, so that the pain of its absence can perhaps be lessened and begin us on the path to our own redemption.
ויהי איש אחד מנהרתיים, צופים מהר אפרים, ושמו אלקנה בן ירוחם בן אליהו בן תואר בן צוף אפרתי, ולא 2 נשים, שם אחד חנה, ושם השנית פנינה, ויהי לפנינה ילדים, ולחנה אין ילדים. I'll tell you of Hannah. We hear her story every Rosh Hashanah. Hannah lived long ago with her husband Elkanah, but her womb was closed up. Hannah bore no children. So Elkanah married another, Penina, and Penina's womb was fruitful. She bore many sons. Every year, when they went up to sacrifice at Shiloh, Elkanah would make an offering, and the meat would be a portion, some for the priest, some for Penina, and some for Elkanah. Most would go to their sons, and the last little bit was for Hannah. Penina acted superior. Her pride was a thorn in Hannah's heart. Elkanah said to Hannah, "Why do you grieve? Don't you know I would rather have you than 10 more sons?" But Hannah's tears would not be soothed. It came to pass when they went up to Shiloh, Hannah stood alone before God and poured out her heart. She begged God to open her womb and bless her with a child. She cried out with all her yearning. She promised if God lent her a son, she'd return the boy to God in sacred service. Then Eli, the priest, came upon her. He was angry. He said, "Woman, for shame. Do you come here now drunk?" She said, "No, my Lord, I am pouring my heart out to God." And he was chastened. When Hannah went home, she was hopeful, and in the fullness of time, she conceived a son. She named him Shemuel, because she asked for him, and God heard her cry. When he was weaned, she took him to Shiloh. She said to Eli, the priest, "You may not remember, but I was here before. I emptied myself in silent prayer, and God heard my cry and gave me this boy. Therefore I bring him to you, that he may spend his life in sacred service." And Eli and Hannah bowed down together. Why, on this day of all days, does Hannah visit us to tell us this story? Maybe to teach us to pour our hearts to the one who hears all prayer. We may not always get what we seek in a form that we understand, but here is what Hannah learned and what we can learn from her. When our heart yearns, we can't begin to see ourselves whole until we see ourselves stand in truth of our yearning. Only then can we see ourselves as truly seen by the Holy One, who already sees us for all we are and all we can be. Hannah named Chen, grace in Hebrew teaches that grace can come to us in seeing the possibility of miracles, in our courage to speak out, in our courage to be who we really are, and in that merit, may the truth of our yearning strengthen us for a good and sweet new year.